The next zone going northwards is in purple, called tropical. Here the zone of maximum temperature occurs just once each year in the summer period for that hemisphere. The tropics of Cancer in the north and Capricorn in the south, at around 22.5 degrees from the equator, mark these areas. The summer is wet, humid and thundery, but the remainder of the year is much drier. We then get into the three similar areas, if you like, the subtropical section. The subtropical high is shown in black. In the northern hemisphere, this is normally split into two areas, which I explain a bit below. In the arid subtropical, these are the desert regions, and they're caused by the subtropical high pressure belts, both north and south of the equator. Here the air is generally descending, and if you look at that chart that we've just diagram we've just been looking at, you can see that the winds generally descending onto the Earth's surface. That type of flow tends to give dry weather, and when that happens over a season long, then the air gets drier and drier, and the weather becomes dry, fairly clear, very hot by day, but the nights can be very cold. On the two edges of each zone there's a short rainfall season. The equatorial side has bursts of thundery type rain. On the intertropical convergence zone, perhaps more of that in another talk at some later stage, as that moves towards the area. Whilst on the poleward side in each hemisphere, the polar air tends to extend south, and this can give occasional, usually mainly light rain in the winter season. The next one, just a touch further north, is called warm temperate, which is another subzone of the subtropical. In our part of the world, we all know where we go for the sunshine, the Mediterranean, but it includes other areas that are favourites for holiday destinations: Florida, parts of South Africa, along with parts of Australia and parts of New Zealand. Here the weather is characterised by warm to hot and fairly dry summers, other than differences caused by mountains and the effects of the sea, whilst the winters tend to be cool and unsettled, as the subtropical jet stream, more about that in another talk, is overhead at times. Sometimes even the polar jet extends into the far north of that area. Now we come to the disturbed temperate, which is shown in green. That's where we are. This is dominated by depressions forming and moving along the polar front. Again, along with an item about the polar jet, that will feature in a later tutorial. So, going back to the polar front, which tends to be beneath the polar jet for much of the year. And the polar jet moves north and south with that movement of the sun. So it tends to be further south in the winter period, further north in the summer period. Gales and rain can be frequent, especially on windward facing coast and high ground. And the UK, along with Scandinavia and much of Northern Europe and North America, fit into this zone. The polar type is shown in blue, and its main feature is the cold, severe cold at times in the winter half of each year. The winter can often be quiet, anticyclonic in type, both winter and summer really, due to the descending air as shown in that first diagram. However, both the North Pole and the South Pole can be very stormy at times, and obviously with being so cold, most of the precipitation falls as snow. Well, these are just very brief descriptions of the different climatic zones with some explanation of why they are where they are. Other factors that can occur, which I mentioned earlier, are the position of a place in relation to mountains, oceans, or height above sea level. All will have an effect on both the weather and subsequently the climate. You will find that places at about the same latitude, due to one or more of the above factors, can end up with quite different weather. I've put 3 cities in, or towns, and they're within about a couple of degrees in latitude, about 52 or 53 degrees north, but do show quite different climate data. That data I've taken from a book I own called Weather to Travel by Maria Harding, sponsored by Powergen when I bought it. The 3 cities are Berlin, Birmingham in England, and Winnipeg in Canada. In the graph that will come up in a moment, I've just put 4 months in to try and illustrate their differences. They're January, March, June and September. Birmingham is generally the wettest, except in the summer when Winnipeg takes that over, probably due to more in the way of thundery type rain. The most dramatic differences, though, are the winter temperature values. The most dramatic differences, though, are the winter temperature values for Winnipeg, situated in the far east of a large continent, compared either to Berlin, which is well away from the Western Atlantic, or even more so with Birmingham, situated on an island on the eastern edge of a large ocean. So just have a look for a time at these values of maximum temperature and minimum temperature, along with rainfall for the 3 cities for January, March, June and September. So the above, in a relatively simple fashion I hope, has shown what the major climate regions are, what their weather patterns usually are, the basic causes of the climate regions and their weather, and a couple of illustrations of how the wind, flow, mountain or height can alter the general climatic zone, as you've seen in the above chart there. Well, I hope what we've just gone through over the last 15 minutes or so, it's been a relatively quick coverage, fairly simple, but I hope it's shown what the major climate regions are, where they are, why they're where they are, the weather patterns, basic cause of them, a couple of illustrations on how the wind flow, position in relation to oceans, mountains, etc. can alter that general climatic zone, and I've got 3 places that I've just shown above at about the same distance from the equator that have fairly different type weather or climate. So then that leads us into looking in more detail at the weather characteristics for our climate zone, that is the disturbed temperate. So the next tutorial will be about what we call the major air masses, as a result of being in that disturbed temperate zone, that affect this country and their characteristics in summer and winter where they're different. Remember that you can play this back as many times as you like and as slow as you like until you've got a reasonable idea. And I'll always be happy to answer any questions that anybody has if you send me an email.